WIBC.
Hey, welcome back to the Tony Kinnet Cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated and first on 93 WIBC. So with the parental rights movement over the last couple of years, there have been some incredibly important strides made in exposing some of the junk that's going on. More importantly, some of the things that your kids can be exposed to if you have an apathetic device policy and you throw them on the iPad without kind of a second thought. That's been incredibly important work. And I've been honored to take part in exposing some of that. But that's not the end of the fight. You need to know what happens if your kid encounters this stuff. What if your kid starts to struggle with gender dysphoria? What if your kid starts to struggle with all of this extra garbage? You need some actual tips. And I'm not talking about 5-minute DIY life hack stuff. You need to know what you're doing. And so we're going to bring on someone that I really enjoyed sharing a panel with her recently. And I had to have her on. It was one of those you get done and it's, oh man, right away needed to bring her on. Her name is Pamela Garfield-Jaeger. She has written a book called Practical Response to Gender Distress, Tips and Tools for Families. This is one that I've ordered. I am waiting on Amazon to throw it at our front door. And Pam, really appreciate you coming on.
Hi, thank you so much.
So first of all, break it down. I know that we talked a little bit before the segment we started recording. What is it about some of the other books that, while they're maybe really good at exposing some of this stuff, they're not necessarily the be-all, end-all of what every family needs?
Yeah, my book stands out for the families that are looking for practical tips. A lot of people understand what's going on. They recognize that schools are indoctrinating their children. They see it all over YouTube. They see it all over their coffee shops. They see it everywhere in the world, and they feel overwhelmed, and then they kind of feel blindsided and don't know what to do.
It's overwhelming. I mean, because
exactly.
You don't exactly have to go searching on a safari to find this stuff. It's everywhere. And it does feel like a wave. How am I going to do this? How am I going to get my kids around this garbage? What do you do?
Yeah, so my book gives practical tips. My book helps you, especially if you have a teenager in your home that has gotten into this whole trans thing, that believes that they are transgender. And as most people understand, it gets really, really pervasive and becomes like a religion. It actually is a religion. And it's really hard to talk someone out of that with very basic mantras like there are only boys and girls or there are only two genders. That doesn't work when you're dealing with a child, a teenager who's really embedded in it. So my book really helps you understand what are the underlying issues, to think about that, and it gives you some suggestions on how to approach the subject with your family.
And when I first took a look at this, of course, a friend of the show, a friend of mine, James Lindsay, has basically put this book in quite a glowing light because he's correct. It really is a short gem of a read when it comes to practical application. I hear the left talking quite consistently about what they believe, this kind of fantasy they have that if there's a child in the home of people who aren't on the far left and they start to go through some of this gender stuff, this gender distress, whatever it is, they expect that the parents just, get out the belt, start beating the kids, starving them, throw them out of the house. And of course, we all would say that's ridiculous. And they say, well, what would you do if that kind of a thing were to happen for you? And I've seen a lot of parents with deer in the headlights. And it seems like the strategy right now is just hope it doesn't happen to you or play it by ear if something like this does occur and hope you are able to counsel in the right way. That's why this book is crucial. That's why. Period.
Yeah. A lot of families, they do all the right things, what they think are the right things, and this still happens because, as we know, we're swimming in queer theory in society right now. So this happens to the best of us, and we need to know what to do. The first step of my book talks about really some prevention, which is about teaching kids to not play along with the pronoun game and why pronouns are harmful. And then it gets into what to do when your child is sort of bitten by the trans bug, and how to talk to them. And, a lot of it has to do with just how would you talk to a teenager who is struggling with something.
So you actually start
doing
out with
a lot of listening.
You start with some diagnosis stuff so that you don't you don't immediately suggest, well, either my child is totally fine and it's all prevention, or, oh, this is, they're at stage 4. This is, sound the 5-alarm warning kind of stuff. Again, useful. It's just useful. I like that because then you don't have to spend a lot of time with guesswork. You can actually meet the kid where they are. Please continue.
Exactly. I have an entire chapter called Why Are the Kids Doing This? And it lists over 25 reasons. And a lot of it does have to do with the dynamics in the family. It doesn't mean the family is bad. It doesn't mean it's bad
No,
parenting.
not at all.
But what this means is usually the trans activists, they target kids and families who are going through something that has some kind of vulnerability, which is natural. Pretty much every family goes through something, maybe a death in the family, possibly a divorce, or they have to move. There are all different dynamics that can happen. And sometimes that is the source of the child feeling vulnerable and wanting to find, their glitter family or find somewhere where they feel stable and whole. And they get these false promises from the trans activists.
Teenagers seek affirmation. They do. And by the way, it's not like this is some kind of a brand new thing. Every single person, you and I included, sought the affirmation of our friends and adults that we respected. Period. That's how humans function. That's what we seek. And this is why it's so important that, again, parents have these kind of tips and this understanding so that they're able to provide holistic, secure, foundational affirmation in the right way to their kids, so that they don't feel the only place they can go to seek understanding and refuge from their problems is someone who is ultimately going to lead them to a decision that could and will scar them emotionally, physically, in ways that will last a lifetime if not careful. So again, I'm just really thrilled after looking through a lot of this book. And by the way, I don't normally go on like this. I'm prattling like a schoolgirl that, her author's new favorite book just came out. This is the first thing that I've read from yours, and I got it on Kindle. And I ended up ordering the paperback because it was one of those things as a former teacher, you'd read professional development stuff, right? You'd glance over. I know you were a licensed therapist in California. You did professional development, right? At some point.
Yeah, some of it was not so great,
Whatever.
But yeah.
So yeah. So you'd bring in, for example, the Peacemaker by Ken Sand, and it's about resolving personal conflict. And you'd flip through it and go, okay, there's like 3 or 4 good thoughts in here. I didn't need to buy this. What a waste of money and time. And it's just sitting on my shelf because, we have enough coasters. But your book, I flipped through the first 5-6 pages. And then I scrolled through and actually started looking at some of your chapters in the middle about how to respond. And I was hooked. And look, my kids are very, very young. But again, just a holistic, forward-thinking approach to making sure that your kids are listened to, but also are provided the right kind of foundation, no matter what stage of this they're in, even if they've never touched it. It's so, so crucial. What kind of a reception have you got from this yet? Have any parents reached out to you and not to blindside you with a question?
Oh yeah,
like this.
I've gotten a lot of positive reception, and it's really humbling. In fact, I just did an interview with Moms for America, and I gave them my book to read and a documentary that I'm in, and the woman said she didn't actually get to the documentary because she couldn't put my book down. She found it so informative and easy to read, and she was intrigued by the whole thing. So that was just from Moms for America. But moms themselves, I do consultations. So a lot of the people who are reading my book are now booking consultations with me. And there was one woman in particular that stands out. She was behind the screen on the Zoom crying, holding up my book, saying, "Thank you so much for this. I've read all the other books on this subject. This is the only one that I found helpful."
And I've looked at your story. I did a little bit of digging, reached out and asked a friend or two who are mutuals. And by the way, this is Pam has no idea what I'm about to say here. This isn't something that we've scripted beforehand. When looking through this as an author, I'm sure there's a humbling experience being told all of this. Because after I went through the situation in which I was canned from Indianapolis public schools, people came out and said similar things. Oh, thanks for speaking out. Thanks for doing this. And in reality, it feels as though the praise is misplaced because I just feel like I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. And I get that same kind of feeling from your work. I don't see you out here glory seeking. This isn't some kind of big PR tour where you're walking around claiming you're Dr. Jill Biden here to save America. No. What I'm seeing is just, this is what I've learned in the practice. This is what parents need to know. This is what can be effective for your family. I would rather read a piece of literature with that attitude behind it than I'm so wonderful, I'm so great, here's my professional development series, why and how you can be just as wonderful and get rich quick and whatever as I am. I'm really encouraged. And I don't know if you've seen this with some of our colleagues, just in the general space. There's a lot of really great stuff coming out right now, not just your book, although it's excellent, that has an attitude of doing the work that needs done because the work needs done. That's an attitude I could get used to, let me tell you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I love that we're all finding each other and we're feeding off of that positive energy, that we're creating things. We're not just complaining about what's going on, but we're actually creating things using our brains, our expertise, and putting it out there in the world. There are several people like us out there.
Well, and it sharpens iron as well. I mean, I think of Robert Pondisio over at AEI. Of course, I think of James Lindsay at New Discourses. I think of Daniel Buck at Fordham Institute. And I read some of their work and I read yours. And there are a few things that I don't disagree with, but I wouldn't have approached in that particular fashion. Thinking in like adolescent psychology and some of the analysis. And that's excellent, because how nice it is to be challenged and sharpened and actually take some of the theories that I've observed and test them against yours. We've lost that in education. We've lost that in psychology, in psychiatry, in therapy. And I cannot imagine how far behind we are starting to get in the world of providing services to families and their kids, because we're so locked in echo chambers that we're not actually arguing and testing new and traditional ideas in a space to actually see what kind of results you get.
Yes, exactly. And the reason I think I've gained some prominence among people who don't want to just follow along is because I've been out there questioning some of the things that my profession has been saying. And I've been gone as far as to say that therapists can be very dangerous. Very dangerous.
Well said.
And I want parents and I want individuals to understand that and to be aware of the dangers so that they can protect themselves and their families.
I remember being asked a couple of questions as a science teacher, just in my very first year as a middle school science teacher, just a small nothing nobody. And I remember my students looking at me, and the look on their face when they'd ask me a question was that I will trust whatever comes out of your mouth. You could come up with something completely fake and I will believe it, because the kid liked me. And it was in that moment, again, not a therapist, which has a much higher, risk and reward factor as far as advice is concerned. But that really put me on notice that, man, I need to be extremely careful with other people's kids and what I say and what answers I give and what direction I put them in. Pamela Garfield-Jaeger, we're going to have you back on. An excellent book. This is listed down in the description. You can go grab it. You should grab it. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
We will be back in just a second. Don't go anywhere. This is the Tony Kinnet Cast on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated, and first on 93 WIBC.